Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. And today we are finishing the Cold War, the traditional finishing of the Cold War. We're beginning a new chapter, but we're ending, so it's like, um, I just wanted to wrap up this unit with a nice little bow tie to, show you how the Cold War came to an end. Um, so let's get into it. So again, so we covered this is our third chapter now in this unit. So you know what it is. New chapter, put the title in the upper margin of your notes. A new era begins, chapter 16. Okay, so chapter 16, lesson 1 is the end of the Cold War. End of the Cold War. That was your warm up. Objectives. You'll be able to identify the relationship between the support of the Soviet Union and popular revolutions in Eastern Europe. Draw a conclusion on how Gorbachev's reforms contributed to the end of the Cold War and identify factors that led to conflict in Yugoslavia. Oh my God. Let's get started. By 1980, the Soviet Union was ailing, a declining economy, rising infant mortality rates, dramatic surge in alcoholism, and poor working conditions, to say a few. Within the Communist Party, a small group of reformers emerged. One man named Mikhail Gorbachev, that's how you pronounce it, Gorbachev. The party chose him as leader in March 1985, and a new era began. So, from the start, Gorbachev preached the need for radical reforms based on perestroika, which means restructuring. And at first, this restructuring meant its economic policy. Gorbachev envisioned a market economy. Never thought I'd hear that ever in the Soviet Union, which is more responsive to the consumer. It would have limited free enterprise, so some businesses would be privately owned and operated. He then realized that reforming the economy wouldn't really work without political reforms. So he hoped to achieve those political reforms through what's called glasnost, or openness, which is a policy of encouraging Soviet citizens and officials to discuss openly the strengths and weaknesses of the Soviet Union. And that sounds like you're opening up a can of worms. So, life expectancy, this is 1960 to 2015. So, we're talking right here. 1989. You're telling me life expectancy goes from, it's not a sharp, it's a sharp drop on the screen, but from about 69 years to 64 and a half years. Hey, why? That's Mikhail Gorbachev. He has a birthmark on his, that's a birthmark. Here's some signs. Glassnose, democracy, freedom. If she's like this as a baby, what she'll be when she's grown up? And the Cold War ends. Cracks are a brewing. You got Communist Paradise, Karl Marx, Stalin, Lenin, and the death to communism. I can't believe my eyes. And that's Gorbachev. Communism dead. So at the 1988 Communist Party conference, Gorbachev set up a new Soviet parliament of elected members called the Congress of the People's Deputies, and it met in 1989. He created a new state presidency, which differed from the old system, where the position of general secretary had been the most important in the Soviet Union. In March 1990, Gorbachev became the Soviet Union's first and last president. Gorbachev's ascension to power in 1985 eventually brought a dramatic end to the Cold War. His willingness to rethink Soviet foreign policy led to stunning changes. Gorbachev made an agreement with the U.S. in 1987 called the Intermediate Range INF Treaty to eliminate immediate range nuclear weapons. Both Gorbachev and U.S. President at the time, Ronald Reagan, wanted to slow down this arms race, even though he's the one that started it. They sought to reduce their military budgets to solve domestic problems. Gorbachev had hoped to focus resources on social and economic changes, and the U.S. wanted to cut its national debt, which had tripled during the Reagan's presidency. Gorbachev stopped giving Soviet military support to communist governments in Eastern Europe, and this will open the door for communist regimes to be overthrown. Mostly peaceful revolutionary movements swept through Eastern Europe during 1989. The reunification of Germany in October 3rd, 1990, was a powerful symbol for the end of the Cold War. And in 1991, the Soviet Union was dissolved, and the long rivalry between the two superpowers was over. So this is the Soviet Union. Why does it look like that? Well, it's curved because the Arctic Ocean's right here. The top of the planet is right around here, so it's curved. But you got Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, small Russia, Belarus, Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan. And then you have Russia. That's the INF treaty being signed. So these are missile deployments eliminated by the INF treaty. So NATO countries are in green, Warsaw Pact are in gray, or this color, like metallic. This is the reunification of Germany. All right, change part one. So while Gorbachev decided the Soviets would no longer send troops to support governments of satellite countries, revolutions broke out throughout Eastern Europe. Workers' protests led to demand for change in Poland. In 1980, a worker named Lech. It's Lech. When I type my key, the E key doubles. So his name is Lech Walesa. I think that's how you pronounce that. Walesa. He organized a national trade union known as Solidarity in English. Translates to solidarity in English. Solidarity gained support of the workers and the Roman Catholic Church, which was under the leadership of Pope John Paul II, the first Polish pope. Even when Walesa was arrested, the movement continued. Finally, in 1988, the Polish regime agreed to free parliamentary elections, the first free elections in Eastern Europe in 40 years. A new government was elected, and 45 years of communist rule had ended. In December 1990, Walesa was chosen as president. So that's on your final. Poland's new path, however, to democracy was not easy. Rapid free market reforms led to severe unemployment. You have the successor, Alexander Kwasniewski, who succeeded Walesa, continued Poland's move towards increasingly prosperous free market economy and democracy. And recent presidents have emphasized the need to combine modernization with tradition. So this is Walesa. Solidarnosc. I don't have the accent for it. That's Kwasniewski. All right, check it out. So the Soviets crushed and then repressed Czechoslovakian reform movements in 1968. Remember Prague Spring? Writers and other intellectuals continued to oppose the government, but they first had little success. In 1988, 1989, mass demonstrations took place throughout Czechoslovakia. And by November, crowds as large as 500,000 were forming in Prague. In December 89, the communist government collapsed. At the end of the month, the guy named Václav, that's how you pronounce it, that's how your book says it's pronounced, Václav Havel, a writer who played an important role in bringing down that communist government, became its new president. Havel was an eloquent spokesperson for Czech democracy and a new order in Europe. The new government faced old ethnic conflicts between the Czechs in the western half of the country and the Slovaks in the eastern half. Avoiding this conflict, the Czechs and Slovaks ultimately agreed to a peaceful division of Czechoslovakia, which split the Czech Republic and the nation of Slovakia in half. Václav Havel became the first president of the Czech Republic, and Mikhail Kovács then became the first president of Slovakia. Under its second president, Václav Klaus, I believe, yes, the Czech Republic had one of the most stable and prosperous economies in post-communist Eastern European states. Slovakia managed to make the transition from a centrally planned economy to a market economy. This is the Prague Spring, if you recall, where the Soviets brought in their tanks. And then that was under Stalin, right? And then you have freedom, Czechoslovakia, split it up. That's the Slovakian guy. No, that's Klaus. It's called it was called, I looked it up, obviously, when I was doing this. It's called the Velvet Revolution. That's the Slovakian guy. That's Klaus. Maybe this is Havel. That's Havel. Václav. All right, Hungary for democracy. So the brutal suppression of the 1956 Hungarian Revolution by the Soviet Union brought about a period of retribution for Hungarians who had participated in the uprising. Conditions did improve in the 60s under János Kadar, who assumed control after the revolution. He loosened restrictions on state-controlled industry and agriculture throughout the 70s and encouraged contact with the West. The standard of living steadily increased throughout the 70s and the 80s as tourism became a viable industry and restrictions on Hungarians traveling abroad were lifted. The 1980s also saw the rise of independent political parties and the creation of a new constitution based on separation of powers, which also guaranteed individual and civil rights. Good job, Hungary. That's from the Hungarian Revolution. That's their man, János Kadar. Repressed Romania. So, communist leader Nicolae Ceausescu, it's pronounced in your book. So, that guy, the Romanian guy, ruled with an iron grip using secret police to crush all dissent. Nonetheless, opposition to Ceausescu, I feel like I'm butchering it. And Romania's communist government grew in the late 1980s. By 1989, the government's economic policies led to a sharp drop in living standards. Food shortages led to government-imposed rationing. Late in the year, Romanian people took to the streets in a peaceful protest. In December 89, the secret police murdered thousands of people who were peacefully demonstrating. So finally, the Romanian army itself refused to support any more repression. Ceausescu and his wife attempted to flee the country, but were captured and rapidly executed. A new government was then formed. Former communists dominated the new government until 1996. 25 years after the end of the communist rule, Romanians elected a center-right candidate, Klaus Iohannis, to succeed Traian Băsescu, who was limited for serving another term. That's the bad guy, Nicolae, and that's him and his wife getting subsequently executed. Collapse. So the pressures of the Cold War on the Soviet economy were only increased by the invasion of Afghanistan, if you recall that. In 1979, the Soviet Union supported the communist government in its fight against anti-communist Muslim guerrillas with troops and money. Meanwhile, the United States supplied the guerrillas with funds and weapons. The Soviet Union was unable to expend any more resources in the long conflict, finally withdrawing its troops in 1989. The Soviet Union was made up of 15 separate republics that included 92 ethnic groups and 112 different languages. As Gorbachev released the iron grip of the Communist Party centered in Moscow, old ethnic tensions came to the forefront, and the people who disagreed with the Soviet policies began to push for change. Nationalist movements began. Remember nationalism, love for your country. In 1989, 1990, calls for independence came first in Soviet Georgia, Stalin's homeland, and then the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, then Moldova, Uzbekistan, and Azerbaijan, all within that year. Crazy. That's what, two, three, six, seven countries? The conservative leaders of the traditional Soviet institutions, the army, government, KGB, and military industries, were worried about the breakup of the Soviet Union would end their privileges. Oh, woohoo. August 19th, 91, a group of these conservative leaders arrested Gorbachev and tried to seize power. This attempt failed when Boris Yeltsin, president of the Russian Republic, and thousands of Russians bravely resisted the rebel forces in Moscow. The Soviet republics now moved for complete independence. Ukraine voted for independence December 1st, 1991. A week later, leaders of Russia, Ukraine, Belarus announced the Soviet Union had ceased to exist. So these are all the different Soviet socialist republics. And that is, oh, wait, no, we're not done. Hello, that's Boris Yeltsin. New. So Gorbachev resigned December 25th, 1991. He turned over his responsibilities to Commander in Chief Boris Yeltsin, the new president of Russia. Russia, not the Soviet Union. Gorbachev was the first and last president of the Soviet Union. Boris Yeltsin, new president of Russia. By the end of 1991, one of the world's largest empires in history had ended. Boris Yeltsin was committed to introducing free market economy as quickly as possible, but the transition was not easy. Economic hardships and social disarray were made worse by a dramatic rise in organized crime, the Russian mob. Another problem Yeltsin faced, not faceted, faced, was that in Chechnya, which is a province in the south of Russia that wanted to secede from Russia and become independent. Yeltsin, however, used brutal force against the Chechens to keep the province as part of Russia. Yeltsin did not solve this problem as fighting continued throughout the year 2000 under his new successor. I wonder who his new successor could be. So this is Russia. This is Chechnya. It's right over here in the world map, right along the Black Sea, I believe, or Caspian. These are Chechens. President P. At the end of 99, Yeltsin resigned and was replaced by one Vladimir Putin, who was elected president in 2000. Putin, a former KGB officer, was widely seen as someone who wanted to keep a tight rein on government power. July 2001, Putin launched reforms to boost growth and budget revenues. The reforms included a free sale and purchase of land and tax cuts. In spite of these changes, the business climate remained uncertain, which stifled foreign investment. Since Putin's reforms, Russia had experienced a budget surplus and a growing economy. Russia can attribute much of its economic growth to its oil and gas exports. The country has estimated 6% of the world's oil deposits, about 30% of the world's natural gas deposits. 2008, a man named Dmitry Medvedev became the new president of Russia. Putin could not run for re-election because of the limits in Russia's constitution, but he became prime minister. However, since Russia's constitution only limits consecutive terms, Putin, that should be Putin, Putin won the presidency again in 2012 and 2018. The term was extended to 6 years in 2008. Putin's latest term as president has been witness to controversies that have strained Russia's relationship with much of the world. Russia's military interventions in both the Ukrainian Revolution in 2014 and the Syrian Civil War of 2015 have been a cause for alarm. Russia also faces internal challenges. A drop in the price of crude oil has impacted the Russian economy. Rising alcoholism, criminal activities, and the decline of traditional family system continue to give Russians concern for the future. That's young Putin. That's Medvedev. And that's Putin again. That's Ukrainian Revolution. This is the Syrian Civil War map. All right, Balkan breakup. There's so much more. Yugoslavia, remember the South Slav state, the Great South Slav state, formed after, what is that, World War One? Yugoslavia was a communist government, but was never a Soviet satellite state. After World War II, its dictatorial leader, Joseph Broz, or Tito, worked to keep together the six republics and two provinces that made up Yugoslavia. By 1990, the Communist Party had collapsed, however. And as we know, Yugoslavia's political scene was complex. You have a guy named Slobodan Milosevic, leader of Serbia, rejected efforts towards independence. In Milosevic's view, the borders of the republic first needed to be redrawn to form a greater Serbian state. When negotiations failed, Slovenia and Croatia declared their independence September 91, and the Yugoslav army attacked Croatia. Increasingly, Serbia dominated the Yugoslav army. Serbian forces captured one-third of Croatia's territory before the conflict ended. Next, the Serbs attacked Bosnia-Herzegovina and acquired 70% of Bosnian territory. Many Bosnians were Muslims, and the Serbs followed a policy of ethnic cleansing towards the Bosnians, which is killing or forcibly removing them from their lands. This ethnic cleansing revived memories of Nazi atrocities in World War II. So in 95, with support from NATO and air attacks, Bosnian and Croatian forces regained considerable territory lost to the Serbians. The Serbs will then sign a formal peace treaty that split Bosnia into a Serb republic and a Muslim Croat federation. That's Milosevic. These are all the different types of ethnicities in Yugoslavia: Slovenia, Croatia. Pink is Serbian, so Serbians are all over the place. Green are Muslim in Bosnia, southern southern Serbia. So this is 92. This is what it looks like. This is some of the war destruction. Hey, look, it's in color. There's a movie by Owen Wilson. It's called Behind Enemy Lines, about this. The movie trailer, you don't want to mess with the movie trailer. It's goated. All right, the Balkans on fire. All right, so a new war erupted in 98 over the existence of Kosovo, which was an autonomous or self-governing province within Yugoslavia. After Slobodan Milosevic stripped Kosovo of its autonomy in 89, groups of ethnic Albanians founded the Kosovo Liberation Army, KLA, and they began a campaign against Serbian rule. To crush the KLA, Serb forces massacred ethnic Albanians. Like it, the Balkans are always on fire. The U.S. and NATO allies worked on a settlement that would end the killing. Albanians in Kosovo regained their autonomy in 99. Milosevic's rule ended in 2000. While on trial for his role in the massacre of Kosovo civilians, Milosevic died in 2006. So, the last political traces of Yugoslavia ceased to exist when the government officially renamed the country Serbia in Montenegro. The people of Montenegro voted for independence in 2006, and in 2008, Kosovo declared its independence. So now, all the six republics of the former Yugoslavia from 1918 were again independent nations, and a new one was born in Kosovo. So this is Kosovo. These are the KLA. That's their symbol. And that's Kosovo. Fiend, we are done. We are done with Unit 8. 400 slides of notes. 400. Look at that. 400. I added it. I added this in just to like get it to 400. So that was a lot. Especially right there at the end. Hey, we're talking that's contemporary history. When I was just a wee little boy, a wee little lad. All right. I know that was a lot. That was a lot. That was a lot. A lot to take notes on. A big unit. But the Cold War is done. Now we're gonna shift to other parts of the world that also simultaneously happened during the Cold War. But I thought we should get through this part of contemporary, modern ending of World War of the Cold War, because now we're going to go back. We're going to talk about places in the Middle East. We're going to talk about places India, Southeast Asia, or South Asia, and then we're going to look at Africa and then Latin America. So technically, we're still not done with the Cold War, but on the timeline, we are. So, yeah, that's going to do. Your homework is page 590, 2 through 4. All right. If you guys did enjoy that, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. BrRrRrR.